All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're exploring a seriously fascinating compound called myo-inositol. We're going to be looking at a massive, growing mountain of evidence about how this simple sugar might actually be the missing key to calming our minds, calming our bodies, and transforming our mental health. You know, for decades, standard psychiatric medications have been the default way to manage intense anxiety, obsessive thoughts, or sleeplessness. We've been hyper-focused on altering the chemical messengers floating around outside our brain cells. But what if standard psychiatric meds aren't the only way? What if the problem isn't a lack of those chemical messengers, but rather that your brain cells literally cannot receive and process the message? Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the misunderstood vitamin B8, the brain's cellular messengers, taming panic and anxiety, using inositol for OCD management, the path to better sleep, and we'll wrap up with dosing and safe supplementation. Okay, Section 1. The misunderstood vitamin B8, fact versus fiction. We've got to start by busting a really common myth about what this compound actually is, because the internet gets this completely wrong all the time. Here's the truth. Myo-inositol is not actually a vitamin. I know, you'll see it labeled that way constantly, but it's really an abundant, naturally occurring sugar molecule, a sugar alcohol specifically. Your body gets about a gram of it a day from a healthy diet, and your kidneys even synthesize it on their own. But for some of us, that baseline level just simply isn't enough to keep our brains running optimally. So instead of vitamin B8, it's more accurate to call it an osmolyte. Now, an osmolyte is this incredible little molecule that helps your brain cells, specifically those supportive little astrocytes, regulate their internal fluid. When your brain is stressed out or inflamed, inositol is actively pumped in and out to keep those cells from swelling up or collapsing. It is literally acting like a microscopic shock absorber protecting your delicate neural networks. Moving to Section 2, the brain's cellular messengers and the PI cycle. Let's look at how inositol builds a foundational communication network right inside your brain cells. To really get why inositol is a game changer, you have to understand the phosphoinositol cycle, or just the PI cycle for short. Think of a neurotransmitter, like serotonin, as a mail carrier dropping off a letter at the front porch of a cell. The serotonin never actually goes inside. Instead, it rings the bell, triggering an enzyme that uses inositol to create internal secondary messengers. Inositol acts as the office worker inside the cell who actually picks up the letter, reads it, and runs the memo deep into the cells so the neuron can fire. This is absolutely crucial, right? It perfectly explains why standard medications like SSRIs might not work for everybody. SSRIs basically just leave more and more mail on the front porch. But if those internal cellular office workers, which are built from inositol, are missing, the cell is entirely deaf to the serotonin signal. The mail just piles up unread. All right, Section 3, taming panic and anxiety. Let's look at the actual clinical evidence. Now that we understand how inositol tames that cellular chaos, let's see how it calms a racing mind in the real world. Check out this landmark double-blind trial by Palaniuk and his team. They gave patients managing panic disorder a massive 18 grams of inositol daily. The results? Weekly panic attacks decreased by an average of 4. That completely outperformed the standard SSRI medication they used in the same study. When you look at this side-by-side comparison, it is wild. Improving intracellular signal processing with inositol was incredibly effective for intense panic. It beat the SSRI by a factor of 2, and get this, it did so with the fantastic side effect profile. The SSRI caused moderate to severe side effects for some patients, whereas the absolute worst thing that 18 grams of inositol did was cause a little mild stomach upset. That's it. Which brings us to Section 4, inositol for OCD management. Here is where the nuance of treatment gets super fascinating when we talk about obsessive-compulsive disorder. So the data tells a twofold story. On one hand, inositol works beautifully as a standalone therapy, or monotherapy for OCD, significantly reducing those repetitive, intrusive thoughts. But if you try to add it on top of an existing SSRI prescription, no extra benefit whatsoever. And honestly, that makes perfect sense. They both ultimately target the exact same serotonin pathway. Once the SSRI maxes out the signal at the door, piling on more inositol inside the cell doesn't change anything. So it's a phenomenal alternative for folks who can't tolerate SSRIs, but not an add-on. Next up, Section 5, the path to better sleep. How does fixing cellular signaling help calm the nervous system for sleep? So many of us struggle with this, but unlike heavy sedatives that just violently knock you out and completely wreck your natural sleep architecture, inositol works differently. It softly lulls the brain to rest through three distinct mechanisms. First, it promotes GABA, which is basically your brain's relaxation brake pedal. Second, it moderates your stress response to blunt those awful 3 a.m. cortisol spikes that wake you up in a panic. And third, it actually stabilizes your blood sugar so you don't wake up jittery. And the clinical numbers back this up beautifully. A double-blind study involving pregnant women who notoriously have a terrible time getting comfortable and sleeping found that just 2 grams of myo-inositol a day resulted in a 20% reduction in the time it took them to fall asleep. Not to mention, their overall sleep quality vastly improved. Section 6. Dosing and safe supplementation. If you're inspired to try this protocol out, listen up, because the dosing is crucial. More is not always better. It is all about matching the dose to your specific goal. Notice the huge spread here. For general, restful sleep, you really only need 2 to 4 grams. But if you are actively trying to rewire psychiatric signaling for panic or OCD, you're looking at a vastly higher dose of 12 to 18 grams a day. Because taking that much at once can cause a little bloating, practitioners always recommend starting low and splitting the dose up throughout the day. To really maximize these benefits, you'll often see holistic practitioners stacking inositol with other synergistic calming ingredients. We're talking magnesium glycinate for even more GABA activity, or L-theanine for those totally chilled out alpha brainwaves. Combining these creates a highly effective, non-sedating toolkit for deep, restorative relaxation. Now, I have to pause for a serious medical caution here. High-dose inositol is not for everyone to just try unsupervised. If you have bipolar disorder, there's a well-known inositol depletion hypothesis. It suggests that mood-stabilizing drugs like lithium actually work by intentionally draining the brain of inositol to stop manic phases. So if you're taking lithium or managing bipolar, jumping into high-dose inositol could literally trigger a manic episode. You absolutely must have strict medical oversight. So I'm going to leave you with this to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. If we can literally fix our internal cellular messengers using simple, naturally occurring nutrients like myo-inositol, could that be the ultimate key to true root-cause psychiatric healing? We are finally moving way beyond just throwing chemicals at the outside of a cell. We're giving the cell the actual tools it needs to listen. It's a profound, paradigm-shifting way to view mental health. Thanks so much for joining me today, and keep questioning how your amazing body actually works.